They stood beside some of history's most infamous men, living in luxury while the world around them burned. But what happened when the war was lost and their husbands were branded as monsters? Some claimed innocence, others remained fiercely loyal, and a few hid dark secrets that would only be uncovered decades later. Did they truly believe in the Nazi cause, or were they just blind followers? Were they victims of their husband's influence? Or did they play a more active role in one of history's darkest chapters? The truth is far more shocking than you might expect. From dramatic escapes to humiliating trials, from lives of shame to desperate reinvention, this is the untold story of the women who stood in the shadows of evil. Stay with us as we reveal the shocking fates of the Nazi wives after World War II. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to uncover more hidden histories. Now, let's dive in. While the atrocities committed by high-ranking Nazi officials during World War II are widely documented, the lives of their wives after the war remain a lesser-known and often overlooked chapter of history. These women, once married to some of the most notorious figures of the Third Reich, faced an uncertain future after the fall of Nazi Germany. What happened to them when the war was over? Were they held accountable for their husbands' crimes? Or did they manage to escape justice and rebuild their lives in secrecy? Some clung to their loyalty to the Nazi ideology, refusing to denounce their past, while others desperately tried to distance themselves from the horrors committed under Hitler's regime. Their lives after 1945 were filled with secrecy, exile, imprisonment, or attempts to reintegrate into society under new identities. Let's take a deep dive into the post-war experiences of Nazi wives and the impact the war had on their lives. Ilse Hess. Ilse Hess lived a life defined by unwavering devotion to the Nazi Party, and, more specifically, her husband, Rudolf Hess, Adolf Hitler's deputy Führer. She was not merely a passive observer, but an active participant in the rise of National Socialism, standing beside her husband during the darkest years of the Third Reich. Ilse and Rudolf Hess met in the early 1920s, as the Nazi movement was gaining momentum. She officially joined the Nazi Party in 1921, and after its temporary ban, she rejoined in 1925, reinforcing her dedication to the cause. At first, Rudolf hesitated in pursuing a relationship with her, but their bond deepened over time. Interestingly, Adolf Hitler himself played a key role in facilitating their marriage, personally encouraging their union. On December 20th, 1927, they were married in Munich, and a decade later, in 1937, their only son, Wolf Hess, was born. Hitler was even chosen as Wolf's godfather, solidifying the family's deep connection to the Nazi leadership. Throughout the war, Ilse remained a firm believer in Nazi ideology. Even when her husband made his infamous solo flight to Scotland in 1941, in an ill-fated attempt to negotiate peace with Britain, she refused to see his actions as a mistake. Despite the international scandal it caused, she never wavered in her belief in Hitler and the Nazi cause. After the war, Ilse Hess faced immense difficulties. With her husband sentenced to life imprisonment at the Nuremberg trials, she was left alone to raise their son. Like many other wives of high-ranking Nazis, she was arrested and placed in an internment camp in Augsburg before eventually being released. She later moved to Allgäu, where she opened a boarding house and tried to build a new life. However, her allegiance to Hitler never faded. Even in the post-war years, Ilse continued to support the ideology she once lived by. She became associated with Stille Hilfe, Silent Aid, a secretive organization dedicated to helping former SS members evade capture or support those convicted of war crimes. In 1952, she published a controversial book, England, Nuremberg, Spandau, Eine Abrechnung, which sought to defend the Nazi cause. Many of her correspondents were known Hitler admirers, further cementing her place among those who never let go of their past. Until the very end of her life, Ilse Hess campaigned for her husband's release from Spandau prison, where he was held until his death in 1987. She passed away on September 7, 1995, leaving behind a legacy that remains deeply entangled with the horrors of Nazi Germany. Margaret Himmler. Margaret Himmler, the wife of Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, and one of the primary architects of the Holocaust, presents a striking paradox. Before becoming the wife of a man responsible for the deaths of millions, Margaret was trained as a nurse with the noble intention of saving lives. During World War I, she worked in hospitals, treating the wounded. After the war, she transitioned to a managerial role at the German Red Cross Hospital. And, with her father's financial backing, she even operated a private nursing clinic. Margaret met Heinrich Himmler in 1927, and despite their different backgrounds, she was 7 years his senior and came from a wealthier family. They married in 1928. She was a strong believer in Nazi ideology and provided financial support to her husband in the early years of his political career, enabling him to rise within the ranks of the party. The couple had one daughter, Gudrun Himmler, who was widely known to be her father's favorite. Throughout the war, Margareta played the role of a devoted wife while managing the family's affairs. She benefited from the immense wealth that Heinrich Himmler accumulated, much of which was stolen from Holocaust victims. She lived in comfort, far from the horrors of the concentration camps, but was fully aware of the atrocities her husband was orchestrating. After the war, her world collapsed. When the Third Reich fell, Margaret Himmler went into hiding with her daughter, attempting to evade capture. Eventually, they were arrested by American forces and interrogated, though she was never formally charged with any crimes. Unlike other Nazi wives who sought to publicly distance themselves from their husbands, Margaret remained fiercely loyal to Heinrich Himmler's memory. She never denounced him, and in her later years, she became associated with post-war Nazi sympathizers, working discreetly to support former SS members through underground networks. Margaret Himmler lived a relatively quiet life after the war, avoiding the public eye as much as possible. She remained a staunch defender of her husband's name and legacy until her death in 1967. Gudrun Himmler, their daughter, carried on her mother's beliefs, becoming a well-known advocate for neo-Nazi movements and continuing to support Stille Hilfe until her own death in 2018. The lives of these women reveal a chilling truth. While their husbands faced judgment for their crimes, many of them carried on, never expressing remorse or acknowledging the suffering caused by the Nazi regime. Some lived in shame and isolation, while others actively worked to preserve their husbands' legacies. Their stories are a stark reminder that the echoes of history do not simply fade away. They continue to shape the world in ways we might not expect. What do you think about their post-war lives? Should they have been held more accountable for their roles in the Nazi regime? Let us know in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten histories. See you in the next one. Margaret first crossed paths with Heinrich Himmler during one of his lecture tours in 1927. From the moment he saw her, he was captivated by her striking blue eyes and blonde hair. Their connection was instant, and they married in July of the following year. However, Heinrich was initially hesitant to introduce Margaret to his strictly Catholic family due to their age difference, her previous marriage, and the fact that she was Protestant. Despite these tensions, his family eventually, though reluctantly, accepted her. The couple welcomed their daughter, Gudrun, into the world on August 8, 1929. Margaret was far from a passive spouse. She was deeply involved in her husband's political life. She officially became a member of the Nazi Party in 1928 and frequently hosted gatherings for the wives of high-ranking SS officers. However, she struggled to gain favor among these women and was notably unpopular. At the 1938 Nuremberg rally, she attempted to assert her leadership, but the other women outright refused to follow her lead, creating an atmosphere of tension and rejection. By the end of 1939, Margaret had taken on an influential role overseeing the operations of Red Cross hospitals throughout Berlin and Brandenburg. Her position extended to missions in German-occupied territories, placing her in direct contact with the realities of war. In her personal diary, she documented a trip to Poland in March 1940, which was under German occupation at the time. Her writings reveal the deeply ingrained ideology she held. "I was in Lodz, then Warsaw. This Jewish rabble is unbearable. Most of them don't even look human, and the filth is indescribable. The amount of work needed to create order here is unfathomable." Margaret's close ties to the regime granted her privileges, and Himmler secured for her the rank of colonel within the German Red Cross. In February 1945, as the war neared its end, she wrote to Himmler's brother, Gebhard Himmler, expressing her admiration for Heinrich. "How wonderful that he has been called to such great tasks and that he is fulfilling them so well. All of Germany is looking to him." By April 1945, Margarete and Heinrich shared their final meeting before his death. However, their marriage had effectively ended long before. In 1941, Margaret discovered that Himmler had been leading a double life, secretly involved with his secretary and fathering 2 children with her. After the war, Margaret was subjected to multiple interrogations regarding her husband's actions and the extent of her knowledge. She consistently denied any involvement or awareness of his crimes, pleading to be exonerated from any Nazi affiliations. However, after years of investigation, in 1953, she was officially declared a profiteer of the Nazi regime. As punishment, she was sentenced to 30 days of penal labor, stripped of her voting rights, and lost her pension eligibility. After her release, she assumed the alias Margaret Boden and lived in seclusion until her death in 1967, attempting to erase any traces of her past. Lena Heydrich's story is one of ambition, devotion, and blind allegiance. Her older brother, Hans, was an early and fervent member of the Nazi Party and the SA. His impassioned speeches about the movement left a lasting impression on Lena, and in 1929, she attended a rally where Adolf Hitler spoke. Deeply moved by his words, she promptly joined the Nazi Party. At the age of 19, Lena attended a social event at a rowing club in Kiel, where she met a young naval lieutenant, Reinhard Heydrich. Their attraction was immediate, and by December 18, 1930, their engagement was publicly announced. However, the following year brought an unexpected scandal. Heydrich was accused of conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman, due to a previous romantic entanglement. He had been engaged to another woman for 6 months before meeting Lena, and when the affair came to light, he was dismissed from the Navy in April, leaving him without a career. It was Lena who, refusing to let her fiancé's ambitions crumble, suggested he seek a position in the SS. Heydrich's sharp mind and ruthless efficiency caught the attention of Heinrich Himmler, who wasted no time in appointing him as the chief of the newly formed SS intelligence service, later known as the SD. This position would become the foundation of Heydrich's meteoric rise within the Nazi hierarchy, and Lena took great pride in her husband's increasing power and influence. Lena was not merely a loyal wife, she was an unwavering supporter of the Nazi cause, sharing her husband's ideology and enthusiasm for the party's vision. She saw Reinhard's role as an acknowledgement of their shared devotion to the movement, and she fully embraced the privileges that came with his status. Both Margaret Himmler and Lena Heydrich played significant roles in the Nazi regime, not merely as the wives of infamous men, but as active participants who embraced and upheld the ideologies of their husbands. Their stories are testaments to the deep entanglement of power, loyalty, and moral blindness that defined the era. What do you think of their fates? Should they have been held more accountable, or were they merely victims of circumstance? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Hitler gifted Lena a vast estate in rural Bohemia, a grand property that became both a sanctuary and a place of darkness. At the estate, she kept several prisoners for forced labor, and disturbing accounts suggest that she physically abused them. The family remained in their luxurious refuge until April 1945, when, like many other high-ranking Nazi families, they fled in fear as the Soviet Red Army closed in. After World War II, Lena was acquitted in the denazification proceedings, a controversial ruling given her deep involvement in the Nazi regime. She fought multiple legal battles against the West German government in 1956 and 1959, ultimately securing a pension, a decision that sparked outrage, considering her husband's pivotal role in the Holocaust. Though Czechoslovakia sentenced her to life imprisonment in absentia, she managed to avoid ever serving her sentence. In 1965, during a vacation to Finland, Lena met and later married Finnish theater director Mauno Mannan, primarily to change her infamous last name. She attempted to capitalize on her past, turning her former husband Reinhard Heydrich's summer home on Fehmarn into a restaurant. However, her plans were cut short when an accident caused a devastating fire in 1976. In a final act of defiance, she wrote a memoir titled Life with a War Criminal, in which she adamantly defended Heydrich's legacy, painting him as a dedicated patriot rather than the architect of the Holocaust. She remained steadfast in this belief until her death on August 14, 1985, at the age of 74. Emmy Sonnemann's life changed forever when she married the powerful Luftwaffe chief and Nazi leader Hermann Göring on April 10, 1935. Unlike many Nazi wives, Emmy did not actively seek party membership, but in a twisted gesture of power, she was gifted a Nazi party membership as a Christmas present in 1938. Before the war, Emmy played a crucial role as Hitler's official hostess at numerous state functions, reveling in the status of being the so-called First Lady of the Third Reich. This grandiose self-image led to bitter feuds, particularly with Eva Braun, Hitler's secret companion. Emmy openly disrespected Eva, dismissing her as insignificant. Hitler was enraged by this and ordered Hermann Göring to ensure that Emmy showed Eva the respect he believed she deserved. This feud had lasting consequences. Emmy was permanently banned from Hitler's Bavarian retreat, the Berghof. Eva, known for holding grudges, never forgave Emmy for trying to overshadow her. During the war, Emmy lived in extravagant luxury, benefiting from her husband's looting of Jewish properties and art collections across Austria, Germany, and Poland. Her life was a testament to the vast wealth and power amassed by the Nazi elite at the expense of millions. When her daughter, Edda, was born, Göring commanded 500 planes to fly over Berlin in tribute, a grand gesture that would have been doubled had she been a boy. After the war, the facade of wealth and power crumbled. A German denazification court found Emmy guilty of being a Nazi collaborator, sentencing her to a year in prison. Upon her release, she was forced to surrender 30% of her wealth and was banned from performing on stage for 5 years. Her glamorous lifestyle was gone, replaced by a modest existence. She eventually secured a small apartment in Munich, where she lived out her later years in relative obscurity. Despite her fall from grace, she remained devoted to the memory of her husband and their former life. She even wrote an autobiography, My Life with Göring, in which she sought to paint her husband in a sympathetic light. On June 8, 1973, Emmy Göring passed away in Munich at the age of 80. Though she had once stood at the pinnacle of Nazi high society, her final years were spent in a world that had long since moved on, unwilling to forget the horrors of the past. And that's it for today's video. We hope you found this deep dive into history as fascinating as we did. Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the fates of these women? Were they complicit, victims of circumstance, or something else entirely? Let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.